a propelling inspiration and inquiry for the Portals project is the rise of next generation leaders. There are next generation leaders emerging in all the core spaces of life: education, health and well-being, science, policy, business and social entrepreneurship, and more. Today, we are speaking with Mark Horoszowski. Mark is the CEO at MovingWorlds, a social enterprise that helps companies scale their social impact programs by engaging employees. He is an RSA Fellow and is a lecturer on corporate social responsibility at the University of Washington Center for Leadership and Social Responsibility. And in this conversation today, Mark describes the 4 stakeholders group that he is able to pull together to meaningfully impact change on real issues, big issues all around the world, by bringing together investors, people that want to volunteer their talent, social enterprises that indeed are developing solutions, and businesses that want to support this effort. This is a fascinating conversation about leading systemic change. Mark, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah, Aviv, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What would you add to the background I offered there?
Maybe that in my free time, I like to go play outside, outdoors, skiing, hiking, camping, running, when with friends, with my wife, especially being a native of Seattle and currently living in the Northwest. That connection into nature has both inspired a lot of, I think, my care for global issues, but I've also learned a lot about self and building an organization in the process.
Let us dive right in by asking you first, of all the things you get to do in your role as a founder and a CEO, what do you enjoy most?
I think for me, it's learning, right? For as long as I can remember, learning is something that's always been interesting to me, right? Even when I was not a good learner, right? Even when I wasn't the best student, even if I was struggling to pick up a new sport, I think just the aspect of using my brain, connecting with really, really interesting people in a continuously evolving both business environment and social impact environment, and getting to observe and hear and do in new ways, that always gives me energy. There's, at least for me, whether it's a new book, a research study, a conversation, just being able to keep asking why and learning and trying new things so that I can really internalize it. You know, in my role of building an organization, of building a team, of working on problems that are still pervasive, there is a lot of learning that has to happen. And I'm lucky enough to be one of those people that is just naturally geared towards learning. So I'd say that's the piece every day, that even if it's a task or a project that I'm not so excited about, there's always an element of learning that gives me a lot of energy to keep going.
What have you learned about how you learn best? Are you, I'm guessing you're a conversationalist learner, but if I said, are you a reader learner, a contemplative learner, a conversationalist learner, or a kinetic learner? Which of those or any other are you?
Yeah, great question. You know, I'm reminded of the quote, right? And I'll probably get it wrong, but show me and tell me and I'll forget, right? Show me and I'll remember. Let me do it and I will. No, I've totally ruined this quote.
No. Hey, let's just make it right. Let me do it and I become the embodied example of its performance.
There you go. That's exactly it, right? So I think it's like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if I read about it or if I hear it, oh, that's interesting, and it'll go away. If I can talk about it with others, okay, then I start to internalize it. But when I actually get to do, right? And I think in my role as a leader of an organization, doing is often also helping others do that as well, right? So whether that's coaching or training. And so for me, it's kind of that journey, right? Is we read, we hear, we see a lot. And then on some of these items, I'll double click into those. And then I go to conversation, right? I talk about it with peers, my wife, a friend. But then I do, right? Then I get to do it. And that's the piece where, yeah.
And the full ownership, the fuller commitment of learning is when we teach it to others and evangelize whether it's a practice, it's a way of solving problems, it's a way of instantiating how to grapple with issues, whatever it is, it's in the teaching it to everybody else in our ecosystem that we truly take fuller ownership of the learning.
Yep, yeah, to teach us to learn twice, right?
Exactly. Well, so let me ask you, what was the core insight that catalyzed MovingWorlds? And then as you described the core insight, actually explain what MovingWorlds is. But I'm interested in the story, the arc of you coming up with an idea and then you embarking on the exciting and challenging journey of bringing an idea into life.
Yeah, no, it's, as I reflect back, and if I think about, what it takes to found and then build and grow an organization, right? There's an element of personal readiness and commitment that needs to happen, right? So I think part of the insight for me is, okay, what led me to that moment to embark on that? And then there's the other insight, which is, where's the market opportunity, right? And is there something that can actually go to market, deliver real value, right? And create revenue. And then there's the insight about scale, right? Can this something that has worked a time or two get picked up, and can you both expand a customer base and your operations in an effective way? So I'll start with the personal piece, right? I think
we want to re-thread through these three insights. Yes.
Okay, cool. We'll get through them all. So start with the personal. For me, I think like many things, a lot of our opportunity, right, is a matter of fortune or misfortune based on where you're born, where you're raised, and who you're raised by. In some ways, I was extremely fortunate, right? I had two parents that stayed together, and despite some really scary health events, namely both of them had cancer within a really, really short time frame of each other. We all made it through, right? And they made it through, and they're still healthy. And I came from a home that had a lot of love, and that, I think, was a big part of creating just a safe place where I could experiment in the world, right? And I think I recognize that, right? That I came from this really fortunate place emotionally. Now, financially, we compared to 99% of the world, right? I was living in America, and so I was in a good spot. But both my parents immigrated over from Eastern Europe. My dad from Poland with $5 in his pocket. My mom is a refugee from Yugoslavia, resettled via a refugee camp. And so financially, we had a different story, right? And so, but even during those times, we came from a place that was connected into a Slavic community in Seattle. And both my parents were very giving of that to community, not financially, but with time. And so I think that sense of community, that sense of responsibility, and then emotionally having a safe place where I could really experiment in the world, that got me to kind of step up in a lot of places, I think, where maybe others weren't or couldn't. And then I think that the piece that really kind of then tipped me over and said, okay, you're a capable person who is able to, succeed professionally earlier in my career. The piece that I think really tipped me was I had started my career actually in accounting. So both undergrad and master's degree in accounting. I started at PwC. I survived one busy season and was just like, this is not for me. At the same time that I was, working countless hours in auditing, I was also volunteering really extensively with the American Cancer Society. And I found that I was successful at work. I was good at collaborating. I was good at problem solving. I was good at operating in ambiguity because I had all this experience as a volunteer. But then my work experience actually really restricted my ability to continue volunteering. And so that was another moment of insight for me, right? Which was to say, I got all this learning by being engaged in community and social causes, right? I built my network, I built skills. And now that I was working professionally and the company was benefiting from me and having all this experience, the American Cancer Society trained me how to communicate effectively, how to mobilize, how to manage against timelines. And then here I was at a huge accounting company with much, much more resources. And I couldn't stay engaged socially and on social causes because of the time commitment. And so that was a moment for me that just felt not core to who I was as a person, right? I wanted to stay engaged in community.
You were experiencing in the most personal, most visceral way, the disconnect
That's right.
the global disconnect in terms of where resources are and where there are needs, and you were experiencing that disconnect, this discordance inside.
Yep, that's very well reflected back, and it resonates a lot, right? And so from there I ended up at a small healthcare marketing company, actually, to help them with accounting, and they serve nonprofits and hospitals and medical device companies. And I had this really great opportunity to transition from doing accounting work to doing analysis on the effectiveness of digital marketing campaigns, right? And this is 2007, 2008, early social media, early pay-per-click, early SEO. And a lot of the skills I had were very useful there, even as an accountant. But again, combined with that volunteer experience, right? I understood how to translate messages to a very big audience. And so, we the Great Recession hits, right? We made it through, right? We actually ended up creating a new digital strategy firm, actually a separate legal entity, wholly owned by the other, but specialized in digital strategy for healthcare brands. We make it through the Great Recession. I missed a couple paychecks during that time, but our team didn't, right? We were able to keep the whole team together and through. And when we came out, the owner of the organization, and I can understand his perspective, but he said, I want you to develop a product and sell as quickly as you can. I'm not going through this again. I want to retire. And I understood that perspective, but that's not the contract that I signed up for, right? I signed up to deliver value, to help address healthcare issues. And I think that for me was kind of that last piece of insight that personally I really needed to step out, right? Which is to say, I have the background and the foundation, right? I have the skills, but now there was a misalignment with what I was trying to build and where I could find that in another setting. So that led to me being personally ready. And I actually then did a lot of research. I love learning, right? So I did a lot of research and learned about this idea of a social business or a benefit corporation, a social enterprise. This was just, Muhammad Yunus wrote a book about this in 2007, right? And so I was fascinated with that type of business model because I was very immersed in nonprofit through a volunteer. I was very immersed in corporate as an accountant. This was in the middle. So I spent a year to just travel and volunteer with social enterprises around the world. And to the next insight, right? Which was like, where was there a market opportunity?
Let's just stay with this insight.
Sure.
You are deciding to give yourself the permission to travel for a year, be exposed to different circumstances as you are in the back of your mind working about and on what is it you are going to do? What are some of the most important impressions through this year of travel?
This is going to sound cliche, right? I learned a lot about myself, right? As you tend to do, right? But I think, what I did is I actually kind of created some like hypotheses, right? Of what I want in the future, right? And one of them was, and I love travel. I mean, that was a huge part of who I was, right? I think still a part of who I am. But you have dreams of like, I'm going to travel the world full time and be a travel blogger of this or that, right? But I went in with the hypothesis that travel in and of itself would not be fulfilling, right? And the meeting people part of it would not be fulfilling. The seeing new places would not be fulfilling, right? I might learn about myself, but that was not my future per se, right? And so I think one of those kind of big ahas was, and there's an Yvon Chouinard quote, who's the founder of Patagonia, right? That I remember reading about at a similar time that I was like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, right? And he said, if you're an asshole and you climb up a mountain and you take a picture at the top, when you come back down, you're still an asshole, right? And I think you can travel, but if you don't do that real inward introspection of what are my values, right? What is my compass when I hit any situation, right? What does the world need? And then what are my skill sets and how can I contribute? The value isn't there. And I think it was kind of like an anti-hypothesis to go into it with, but I really saw and I experienced that, right? So I think I came out of that experience with this desire to say, like, Seattle is actually my home, right? Mary, who's now my wife, is the person that I want, to be with for my life. And the problems that I want to work on are the larger systemic problems that people tend to shy away from. And because of size, because of economic viability. So I learned kind of a lot of also some of the things I didn't want, which helped me then focus on the things that I really did. I think that was probably my biggest discovery.
So I'm now becoming very interested in the next piece, which is how do you narrow and how do you define clearly what is the problem you're about to go to try to solve and how you approach that journey?
Yeah. When I started this experience, I started to work on a business plan for day one of what I would do when I got back. And the name, I still have the PowerPoint, kind of file, right, of where I was scratching my first business plan. And it was a center for social enterprise development and empowerment, right? That's what I wanted to come back and build. And as I was embarking on this experience, as I was volunteering, as I was interviewing social enterprises and impact investors for my blog and just for my own edification and learning, I was taking notes and thinking about how could I build some center to help Seattle create a social enterprise hub. And as I embarked, my research question was, what makes social enterprises communities flourish? And so that's what I started with. And I knew when I came back, I would probably start something like that. Now, when I was in Argentina, this was the last step, my last stop on this global experience. And I ended up meeting a gentleman, his name's Derek, and he's Dutch, had been living in Argentina, had started an impact investing organization in Europe, had expanded it across Latin America. And we met at a social enterprise meetup event. This is late 2011. And he was really intrigued by my experience, right? And we had a great conversation. We met for coffee the next day, and then the day after that, and the day after that. And, finally he said, look, I know you're returning back home soon, but it just sounds like there's a business opportunity here, right? Which is you have this global network of professionals that are not engaged at work. They're looking on how to make a bigger impact in their careers and in the world. They want to travel. You did this. You have a blog. People were asking you for advice and help, and you were doing it for free. It seems like there's a business here, right? And then he said, and look, and I'm kind of looking for my next challenge. And so anyway, we kicked it around. It was his idea to start MovingWorlds. We met up consistently, and then we finally said, let's validate this. And he goes, okay, good, because I already bought a domain name, right? He came up with the name. And I think what we saw was there was a high aspirational vision that people had of themselves to go do good in the world.
So at that stage, what are you defining as the value proposition or the essence of the business at this early stage before you actually engage in any practical next step?
Work, yeah. For us, it was, for mid-career professionals that want their jobs and careers to mean something, right? MovingWorlds creates a place for you to embark on your own discovery and to go volunteer with a social enterprise around the world that will give you free room and board in exchange for your time and expertise. And so that was our first prototype, right? Our Google Doc, our balsamic mockup, an Unbounce page eventually. That was what we launched with. And professionals paid us money for help finding a project that would cover their room and board in exchange for their skills, and for guidance and clarity on how to do that safely and generatively.
So there was an element of coaching or mentoring or consulting inside that?
Good question. More almost like trading and guidance, right? Like, hey, you're going to go travel to this part of the world. Here are the 10 things that you need to do, right? Yep. Now, to your point, though, as we listened to our users, they were asking for coaching. They were asking for mentorship. They were asking for more specific professional development, right? And this was one of the breakthrough moments at MovingWorlds, right? When we realized that if you asked people and did research on how much money people have spent trying to volunteer, right? Their budgets are zero, right? You don't have money to volunteer. But if you ask people what their budgets are for continuing in professional education, right? Now you're getting into very high value, budgeted for needs that people have. And so in 2015, we launched the MovingWorlds Institute. There was some other work that happened first with corporates and others that enabled us to get to this stage, but we launched the MovingWorlds Institute that actually provided what you just said, like coaching, mentoring, training, and more focused professional development.